By the way, back to Casper. The people in Casper were again real good to me, understood why we were leaving, helped me look for jobs, give me good job recommendations, and so, you know, we parted company wishing we didn't have to. And once we got moved into Ashland, Kentucky, you know, it sort of became obvious that my values didn't really match with the values of the aviation department.
Mm-hmm.
And mom's amazing. She can blend in anywhere. She did a great job of blending in with the local culture because part of her job was calling on patients that were in remote areas of that part of the country and making sure that they were getting home health care that they needed. But at any rate, yeah, I just, you know, the only hard part of the job was feeling uncomfortable all the time because it was so hard to fit in with the rest of the pilots and get along with the manager and the chief pilot.
What specific values are you thinking of?
Well, I really wanted to learn how to fly the airplanes well, and I'm an honest guy. And one of the first things my mentor at that place was trying to teach me was how to pad expense accounts. So that if you spent $10 on supplies for the airplane, make it $12 or $15. And that just wasn't right to me.
So that you could pocket or what?
Yeah, they were using it as an extra means of cash flow. They were cheating on their expense accounts, all of them.
Cheating Ashland Oil.
And Ashland Oil's pilots were cheating on their expense accounts.
I'm trying to get more money from Ashland Oil.
Yeah, you know, 20 or 30 extra bucks a month,
mm-hmm.
which is nothing compared to your character and your integrity that you're selling out if you do that. And I just, you know, I didn't know any better. I never cheated Clinton Aviation or Casper Air Service out of a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes against my grain to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And for a few $100 a year, $100 a year to sell out your, you know, your code of ethics, your self-worth, screw that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't cheat on my taxes. I don't cheat on expense reports. You know, it's not right. It's not right for me. So I don't do it. I won't do it. So, you know, I eventually got cross-raised with them on that. I lasted there 11 years.
Yeah, crossways like verbal.
They didn't like me.
Uh-huh.
They felt threatened by me. I was an Army officer. The few of those who served in the military, only one or two others were military officers. I was a college graduate. Only 2 or 3 of them were college graduates out of about 25 pilots.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only one with a master's degree in anything.
Hmm.
So here I was, you know, knowing more and thinking different. And these guys were just threatened by me. So behind my back, they were kind of sabotaging me to my boss and stuff. It was just crazy. I could go on for hours about how crazy it was. But it would be, part of your raises and promotions were based on your annual evaluations. I don't like annual evaluations anyway if they're used once a year as a club to correct a problem. Well, if somebody's got a problem as a pilot, they ought to be fired. Go help them change careers or something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So some pilots fly better than others, and some pilots are on time more than others and stuff like that. You can tweak that. Or if a couple of guys aren't getting along flying together, you can fix that. But what Ashland Oil's manager and chief pilot would do would be to save up all these little petty things and then bring them up at an annual review an interview, just an evaluation of how you're doing and how you can improve, that sort of thing. Most big corporations do that. But they were using it as a tool to turn pilots against one another. They were saying, well, you know, we heard that on this flight on this day 6 months ago, you did this. And for that, we're going to knock you down from a performance higher to a performance lower. And I was thinking, well, you know, this is crazy. You know, if somebody had spoken to me that day, we would have fixed it. You know, Casper Air Service, man, if you went out and you had something they disagreed with, go on, they'd call you in, bam, they'd meet the airplane right on the ramp and say, hey, what happened at Big Piney, Wyoming this afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
And you could say, well, what do you mean? And they could say, well, we heard you did this. And I said, yeah, I did, and I did it because of that. And they'd say, oh, and away we'd go, and the question had been answered. Whereas at Ashland, man, they'd hold this stuff for 6 months. And then they'd make it obvious that one of your pilots had turned you in for some supposed violation and of something like a company policy on what kind of shoes to wear. Yeah. And then the next question, believe it or not, would be, well, Tom, do you have anything to report about your other pilots that you've flown with over the year, things we ought to know about them that aren't right? In other words, what they do is say that your coworkers have turned you in for this. Now, you ought to be angry enough to turn your coworkers in for that, and that'll give us ammunition when we interview them, and we can demote them and pay them less too. And I said, well, you know, I remember that. Yeah, I remember some stuff, but I don't want to bring it up without the guy being here with me, because it might have just been a misunderstanding. Why don't we do this? Why don't we have a meeting where we call so-and-so in, and the three of us discuss it together and see whether it's a problem or not. And if it's a problem, it'll get fixed right away. And man, that made the chief pilot mad, because he wanted to continue to play one pilot against the other. And I just refused to play that game with him. It was so unfair. This one guy was so jealous and so bitter that he turned me in for wearing shoes he didn't like. Okay? They were Rockport dress walkers. They're really terrific for flying airplanes because they've got kind of a crepe sole, good grip, good traction on a wet ramp, and good traction, and they're comfortable and lightweight. And yet they were made out of leather to look like dress shoes. Well, he actually reported to the chief pilot that I wasn't wearing appropriate shoes for the job. And the chief pilot, being the small-minded individual that he was, actually took heed of that and brought it up on my performance review. The humor of it all is that those very same shoes were part of the Aramco Flight Department's flight uniform.
Wow.
So that's the huge difference between being realistic and being nasty.
It's like you were meant to go to Aramco or something.
But you know, it's one of those things where I just got caught in a bad situation and made the best of it, because Mom was getting her undergraduate degree and graduate degree, and you guys came along, and you know, I had a life outside of work and plenty of time off to take care of you while Mom went to school and while she worked and stuff, and so I just put up with all that kind of stuff.
But did you generally feel pretty horrible when you got back from work?
I just compartmentalized it and left work at work.
Okay. And are there any other specific stories about Ashland Oil that you think
Well,
stand
you
out
know,
in
as a
line?
corporate pilot, you're pretty close to the people who run the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to know not as personal friends, but as people I was acquainted with, the top management and middle management of Ashland Oil, and they were great people.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just hardworking guys who were using an airplane to get them to meetings and to visit customers and stuff. I thought they used the airplanes very well and used the flight crews very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tried to go out of my way to make sure they got treated well.
Mm-hmm.
And
So you got along with management fine, just not the other pilots.
right.
Huh. That's interesting. Any other stories of kind of crazy other crazy pilots doing crazy stuff or?
There was this one guy who knew I really didn't like cigarette smoke,
Uh-huh.
and he'd gotten promoted ahead of me,
Uh-huh.
and didn't respect me at all, and smoked 8 cigarettes in the cockpit while we were flying on a 1-hour trip. I absolutely hated that, and that sort of nonsense is the crap I had to put up with.
Uh-huh.
You know, another guy, I had nasal congestion, and I told him I had nasal congestion, and would he keep the altitude low so that, you know, I wouldn't have as much pressure change flying back from, I think, somewhere in Minnesota. And I had to leave the cockpit for something, maybe to get a cup of coffee, or for him or for me or both of us. And when I got back, he'd changed the altitude to like 4,000 feet higher, which dropped the pressure lower. And you know, it was one of these deals to cause me a medical problem, or at least some pain. And those sorts of things are so just nonsense type sabotage that I was running into at work there.
And that was just. Do you think that's part of the Kentucky culture?
Not so much Kentucky culture as the culture of the management of that flight department, and that culture permeated into the pilots themselves.
Where do you think that came from?
Nasty people with a nasty attitude.
Yeah. But other than that flight department, what did you think of Kentucky and the people there?
You know, it's a special culture in the United States, or a set of special cultures. The eastern part is coal mining and tobacco and probably marijuana businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And the people were mostly labor, because the management, the owners of the land, were all absentee coal mine owners. So they were having it pretty tough, and they pretty much stayed to themselves. It'd be interesting to read up on the Scotch-Irish immigration into Appalachia, to learn how isolated they stay,
Mm-hmm.
and how much they stay to themselves, and you know, basically don't welcome outsiders.
Mm.
They're very very much to themselves. They're pretty nice people, but if you didn't go to high school with them, they weren't really interested in developing a friendship with you.
Was that same? Would that go for the flight culture, the flight
No,
department?
no. The airplane drivers came from places like Cincinnati and
Oh, so they were native Kentucky people then.
in Indiana
Mhm.
and New York, and
Even the management, were they from out of
places
state
like
as well?
that. Huh?
Was the management with the flight department management, were they from out of state as well?
No, they were both from Louisville, Kentucky.
And they were the ones that it was trickling down from.
I think so. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Is there anything you miss about Kentucky, or anything that you really liked about Kentucky?
Within less than an hour, we could be in nice state parks with nice freshwater lakes. Great places to take you guys on a weekend or a day off.
Mm-hmm. What state parks?
there was one state park close to the house called Greenup State Park,
Mm-hmm.
and there were some in southeastern Kentucky, um, near in Harlan County and Hazard and areas like that, and they were always fun to visit.
Yeah, what'd you like about those parks?
Oh, gee, it was like being outside today, you
Mhm.
know, warm breeze and freshwater beaches, and mom's making fun of me.
Mhm.
uh, it was kind of nice there, it really was. And they had nice restaurants at the parks.
Those are little lakes and everything.
Mm-hmm. And boat docks, and
Mhm.
people could take a. One thing real popular was the fact that a lot of these streams and rivers had been dammed up as reservoirs. So there were a lot of sandy beaches to swim and to use to swim and play, and
Mhm.
um, there were pontoon boats to rent and ride around on and explore the lakes. It was kind of hot and humid for us to camp. I've tried camping one night with Michael. Before you guys were born, Mom and I tried to go on a camping trip, and we were so hot and sweaty and miserable and mosquito bitten, we gave up on that.
Mhm.
We didn't do any more camping till we got to Arabia.
And where did Sherwin come into all this?
Oh, the young Sherwin boy, what was his first name?
Chris.
Chris Sherwin was in the same class with you guys, I think, in kindergarten
Right.
in Ashland. So we met his parents through you guys, and they were unique people, but nice people, and they were real nice to us. So on the way out of town, leaving Ashland, Mr. and Mrs. Sherwin brought Chris by to say goodbye and told us that he was going to Aramco in Arabia. And I told him, I said, well, if they have a good flight department, everybody there's happy, and the people don't quit, and they're fair to their employees, that sort of thing. If it's a good company to work for, let me know and I'll try to apply. And so I actually got a postcard from them saying, if you're interested, here's the contact for the safety pilot for the aviation department, and here's how to contact Aramco Services Company in Houston. And so I called up the safety officer, a guy named Darrell Holzman,
Mhm.
and chatted with him, and he confirmed the same thing that the Sherwin said, that it was a great place to work and a good environment, and they treat you right if they hire you and that sort of thing. So and people stayed there for decades when they got a job there. So I called up Houston. That was kind of fascinating. I called up a Aramco Services Company in Houston, and the lady in human resources that interviews pilots, I told her a little bit about myself. Told her I was working for Iceland Oil, flying, basically King Airs and Citation jets, and she said, we don't have any openings at this time, and but go ahead and send us your resume just in case. And she saw that on there that I had a master's degree, and bingo, they were interested.
Oh, wow. Even if it's not related to flying, they just like that.
Yeah, well, I was a pilot. Pilots are pilots. They're people who climb into airplanes, start the engines, and drive them off into the sky and land somewhere else.
But a master's degree just gives you a lot of credibility.
It sure did.
Mm-hmm.
With big corporation like Aramco, it did. And not only that, but I used a lot of the training and experience I had in business in the Ashland Oil Flight Department. And I'd go out there on my days off and weekends and stuff to work on things that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And they noticed that.
Ashland Oil did?
Aramco noticed it.
Oh, they saw it on your resume?
No, they saw me working extra at Aramco.
Oh, at Aramco. Oh, I'm getting confused. Okay,
at Aramco.
Okay.
At the Aramco Flight Department, they noticed that, you know, I was not only flying the airplanes, but I was taking an interest in the flight department and stuff it needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up doing some computer-related rewrite work of the flight operations manual for the chief pilot. And the fact that I could do it and do it efficiently and do it behind the scenes without interrupting anybody's work. And also, I could get along with other nationalities who would be responsible for maintaining that document.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that impressed them. So there came a time after about 3 years where a whole flood of Aramco Arab pilots came back from training and they didn't need a place to put them. They had to lay off a bunch of American pilots. I wasn't laid off. I was transferred from place to place and to do computer work and editing work and general business work because I had a better education than most of the pilots.
Now,
And I proved that I could do the work.
so were you ever surplus? Like, or did they before
They called it surplusing, but they never got me out the door.
was it because of your own initiative, or did they take initiative and place you?
Both.
Both. They were trying to place you somewhere else.
Yeah. They, you know, in the aviation department manager and chief pilot made sure that other organizations were aware of me and would put me to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, it was kind of a topsy-turvy decade while we were there.
Changing jobs and everything.
Well, I did in order to stay.
Yeah. How many jobs did you have there? 3?
Let's see. I started out in aviation, and I ended up working for the senior group to the aviation department.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked for them for, I don't know how long, maybe a year. And then Aramco took over the Samaric refineries and distribution points. And they needed people out in Riyadh to install Aramco's business software and Aramco's business processes and procedures in places like Riyadh, where I worked at the Riyadh refinery, and a place called Rabigh, the Rabigh refinery.
I remember that, yeah.
And at the Rabigh refinery, I ended up in charge of all the business computer operations for that whole refinery operation. There were 1,000 people working there, if you include the contractors.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people from, I had Saudi Arabs and Filipinos and Egyptians working for me, and got along with all of them real fine. And together, I think there were about 11 of us who would be delivered $4 million worth of computer equipment and told to install it in the refinery and in the administration building and get it all hooked up. And that's what we did.
So you worked in Dhahran.
And then Riyadh.
For how long?
About a year maybe.
You worked for 3 years in Dhahran, right?
Uh-huh.
And then a year.
In Riyadh.
And then.
In the Riyadh refinery.
Uh-huh.
And then got transferred to the Rabigh refinery and did a lot of good work for them.
How many years?
Maybe a year, maybe 2, I don't remember.
And then after that?
And then I spent some time in Jeddah, maybe 6 months or a year, doing computer work and administrative work for them in Jeddah. And then after Jeddah, I got transferred back to the refining and distribution headquarters group to do more computer work.
Where was that?
Where?
Yeah.
In the tower building at Dhahran.
Right. How many years was,
I don't remember, but it was for several years. And then after that, they transferred me to work for a guy named Ed O'Brien. Not Ed O'Brien, but work for his group, the finance group. And I ended up working in the payroll department of finance. And I was one of the guys responsible for computer security, password security, access to all the payroll databases, plus responsible for making sure that 50,000 people got paid right every month.
Wow.
And my boss came to me one day and said, "Tom, we've been trying to get this finished for at least a year. What we want to do is change the way we get the payroll to the central bank in Jeddah, so it can be distributed, direct deposited to people's accounts." So see if you can figure out a way to get the data downloaded, transmitted across secure lines from Dhahran to Jeddah. The payroll data, so everybody could get paid every month correctly. What they were doing was creating these big magnetic tapes on a mainframe and then handing them to a courier who would ride out to Jeddah on an airplane and then get a taxi cab or a limousine or something to physically deliver these magnetic tapes to the central bank in Jeddah, all right? And it would take a whole day. And for that whole day, if something happened to those tapes, 50,000 employees wouldn't get paid. So as the technology grew, my boss asked me to head up a group that I was going to form up informally to allow us to transmit the payroll data from Dhahran to Jeddah. And I got that all connected up so that once a month all the routers would open and the bank system would open and all the computer security would let the payroll pass. And I forecast, doing the arithmetic, I forecasted it'd take 30 minutes to transmit the data. It took 31 minutes.
Wow.
I was so proud of that. My boss was so grateful. He was a Saudi Arab guy from Najran.
And so that included our neighbors getting paid and everything, right?
All the Saudis. I don't know if it included any Americans or not. I know it was 50,000 employees plus or minus.
Why wouldn't it include the neighbors?
I think what they would do for Americans on the American payroll is have the money transferred to Aramco Services Company, and Aramco Services Company would run the American payroll in Houston, and get the direct deposit.
Oh, okay. So it
taken
was
care
the
of
Saudi
in
employees
in American banks.
It's the Saudi employees that you were dealing with. The 50,000 employees you're talking about, that's the Saudi employees.
Saudis and Filipinos and Pakistanis and Brits.
Did anything ever happen to that tape?
I don't know. Never had time to ask.
But that includes nurses and doctors and all kinds of people, right? Those 50,000 employees?
Yeah. All the people working out on the drill rigs, all the people working out at the refineries.
But hospitals too, right?
Yeah, all the administrative people
Oh, that's interesting. Um,
that weren't American.
how'd you like Jeddah?
Um, I spent all my time working when I was out of town, so I really didn't get. I couldn't tell you anything about the city of Jeddah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there was a refinery in Jeddah, and there was an administrative group in Jeddah, and I worked for the administrative group that provided support to the refinery and to anybody subordinate to Jeddah and that organization out there.
Where'd you
And I
live?
thought that was, I really liked it out there. I liked the people I was working with, the Arabs, the Americans, the Brits.
Where did you live in Jeddah?
There was an Aramco housing compound there. There was former Samaric compound, and I had a little apartment there.
Huh.
You know, right on the ground floor.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it was 1,000 square feet. Never measured any, but it had a little kitchen, a little dining room, a little bedroom, and a little bathroom.
Mm-hmm. And then you would fly back every weekend, right?
Yeah,
How was that?
it was what we did.
How long was the flight?
About an hour and a half.
Really?
Yeah, maybe 2 hours. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. How did Robic compare to Jeddah?
I liked working in Robic better because it was more responsibility and more change, faster, and more pressure,
Mm-hmm.
and more problems to solve.
Mm-hmm. Were you right in the water?
Yeah, we're at Jeddah and Yanbu. Oh, I worked at the Yanbu for a while. I missed that. In fact, substitute Yanbu for Jeddah, and that's where I worked. I never did work in Jeddah. We'd go through Jeddah
Yeah.
to
Okay.
catch a flight from
yeah,
Robic. I'm sorry, I never was in Jeddah.
Okay.
Instead of Jeddah, I was in Yanbu.
Okay, that sounds-
Yanbu is more settled and more established.
Did they have American kids there too and everything in Yanbu?
They had an American school. Uh-huh.
I thought so. I thought I heard something about that.
Yeah. But I never wanted to see the family move to Riyadh or Jeddah because you guys had it so much better in Dhahran.
Oh, that was a consideration.
That was a possibility.
That would have been interesting. So you really got to see Saudi quite a bit then, huh?
Yeah, as an oil worker, not as a tourist.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Was it interesting? Was there any silver lining to be?
Yeah, I got to know people from 50 different nationalities by working shoulder to shoulder with them.
Mm-hmm.
And either you got along with them and everything went great, or you didn't get along with them and they were miserable and you looked like an idiot because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't give you any support.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. So it's either you were part of a good working environment or you were a bum. You know? And I always try to be part of a good working environment. If somebody's nice to me, I'm really grateful for it. I couldn't care what their nationality or gender or anything else is.
Was there a silver lining though to working like out of Dhahran and seeing Robic and Yanbu and Riyadh and?
Yeah, I didn't like being separated from you folks,
Mhm.
my family.
Yeah.
That's all. But yeah, it was. I enjoyed being out
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what was going on outside of Dhahran.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, much to my surprise, the people working in anywhere outside of Dhahran were real friendly, and I found out I couldn't have fun with people in Dhahran. They weren't all that friendly. They were kind of clannish and cliquish, and I wasn't part of the clan or the clique. The only difference was that I was actually cooperative with everybody and would get work done. That was a big difference between me and a lot of the Americans there. They'd been there so long and they were so entrenched that they could either do something useful or be retired in place and get the same pay. So
Something that master's degree really kind of saved your butt a little bit.
clearly.
It was really worth the effort you put into it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. everything I've ever done to improve my knowledge and skill
Mm-hmm.
has been extremely beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I kept up with technology when technology, uh, digital technology, information technology started to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And that let me apply digital technology to business systems and business operations. And it helped me understand what was going on around me so that when I was asked to establish this communications link between Aramco and Harman and the bank on the West Coast, I understood what they were trying to do. And I understood all the digital technology that had to be put in place to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood the language I had to use, the technical language I had to use to persuade somebody in communication security to let our IP address pass through their router. You know, and they could tell me what needed to be done, and I could go to the head of security, the vice president of security, and have him sign permission for that to happen, that sort of thing.
Hmm. And did you prefer the culture in Saudi compared to, or Ashland Oil, like Aramco versus Ashland Oil?
Oh, the work environment at Aramco was textbook good.
Really?
Uh-huh.
That's cool.
Yes, it is.
Hmm.
Fortunately, well, the fact is the oil companies hire the best people they can find
Mm-hmm.
and train them as well as they can. So when the American Oil Company people went to Saudi Arabia in the 30s